Switzerland to host Ukraine peace conference, doubling down on delusion. But there is a sober voice of reality that might be heard. Switzerland is preparing to host peace talks on June 15th and 16th in the resort town of Bergenstock in a publicized attempt to seek a peace in Ukraine. The conference is expected to have 160 national delegates from up to 100 countries attending, and is a product of the public relations campaign of Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky when he lobbied attendees at the 2024 World Economic Forum at Davos. The conference was supposed to be an opportunity to present his 10-point peace plan and to garner their support. However, this peace plan has no substance as a roadmap to peace, and it excludes the participation of the Russians. This fatal flaw in the structure of peace talk format and the admission from experienced diplomacy analysts that any serious peace talks cannot take place if one of the two primary combatants is not invited to attend. Realizing this flaw and the damage to Switzerland's reputation as a neutral arbiter, the organizers are attempting to reset expectations and the goals of this publicity event. The primary flaw of the Ukraine-initiated peace talks is the fact that Russia was not invited, and that is due to the Ukrainians originally insisting that the 10-point peace plan is the blueprint for any peace talks, and the Swiss government naively agreed to it. China's President Xi Jinping, one of Russia's closest allies, was in Europe this week and met with French President Emmanuel Macron. One of the subjects of the meeting was the French insistence that China pressure Russia to end the war in Ukraine. President Xi responded to the attending media that negotiations was the only way to resolve the conflict and that allowing equal participation of all parties was the key to success. This was clearly a response to the Swiss peace conference excluding the Russians, so it is expected that China will not be present at the conference either. The Swiss Foreign Ministry admitted that a successful peace process in Ukraine must include Russia, but that Russia will not be invited but may be in future talks. This is acknowledgement by the Swiss that these peace talks are flawed in the current format. The abandonment of the current peace conference format would be seen as an abandonment by the West of the Ukraine cause and would be exploited as such, so it will go forward as originally planned. However, this does not mean that the 10-point peace plan will be accepted, and it looks more than likely that it will be presented as a matter of course, but it will most likely, for the most part, be politely ignored. This is the face-saving part of the peace summit, but a new strategy is emerging. The Ukraine Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba, in an interview with the media group Foreign Policy, realizing the appearance of not including the Russians, stated that seeking negotiations with Russia will occur after the Swiss summit. Kuleba has outlined a new goal of meeting is to create a coalition of like-minded countries to pressure Russia and its partners to join peace talks. Kuleba attempted to justify the decision not to include the Russians in his interview by stating that Ukraine had participated in over 200 negotiation sessions between 2014 and 2022, and in the end, the Russians still invaded. He said that that was proof that the Russians were not serious negotiators and that it was not the right time to hold talks with them during the Swiss-hosted talks. Again, this does not seem to be a legitimate reason, but another attempt to justify the Russian exclusion and to keep the conference scheduled when there appears to be no point to it. Kuleba stated in an apparent attempt to give the summit a purpose that there are two requirements of conducting peace talks with the Russians. One is for a coalition of like-minded nations to be formed to help drive peace talks, and the second is battlefield success. The Swiss peace talks' primary objective, according to Kuleba, is not the 10-point peace plan, but to set groundwork to create those coalition of like-minded nations. This is an attempt to salvage some purpose for the peace talks going forward. This will likely fail to produce a significant coalition due to the attendees originally invited to sign on to the 10-point peace plan, with the goal to create a bloc of countries that agreed to Ukraine's grievances and not necessarily find a way forward to peace. Attempting to get this group of countries to become a functionally cohesive coalition of like-minded nations is remote, as it includes countries from BRICS, not including Russia or China, and all the members of the G7. These two groups alone have different priorities and geopolitical alignments that for them to form some solid coalition to pressure both Russia and China are highly remote. The other question is why the coalition is even needed to have peace talks when just two parties and an arbitrating party or parties to help keep the talks moving. That's all that is needed. Kuleba's second goal of battlefield success is correct, but it is unclear how Ukraine attains that goal on its own. Battlefield success, or at least at best being in a strong position on the battlefield, would give the Ukrainians a negotiating position that is not based on desperation. If the Ukrainians are weak on the battlefield, the Russians will be less incentivized to compromise in negotiations because they could simply attempt to take on the battlefield with no compromise required. Also, if the Ukrainians are close to collapse or have already collapsed, negotiations will turn into Russians dictating terms. So battlefield success is a requirement for fair negotiations. The demographic and economic advantages of Russia was going to create a situation that eventually the Russian weight was going to give them the battlefield advantage in the long term. Even with Western weapons, the manpower differential was eventually going to become an inescapable reality. So delaying the talks only further erodes the Ukrainian position. The longer the war goes on, the less likely it is that Kuleba's second goal could ever be accomplished. The original intent of the Swiss peace conference with the 10-point peace plan and this new cobbled-together purpose is only prima facie better, and Switzerland is hosting something that is metaphorically a three-ring circus unless something changes in the next month. What does this mean for the prospect of peace in Ukraine? There are voices in Ukraine that realistically evaluating the facts on the ground and facing the facts and not deluding oneself is the only way to make the best and most rational decision for Ukraine. Major General Vadim Skibitsky, the deputy chief of Ukraine's military intelligence directorate, stated to The Economist magazine that there was no way for the Ukraine to win the war and that the peace treaty is the only way forward to end the conflict. He evaluates that 2024 will be a year that both sides attempting to create the most favorable battlefield position to strengthen their position on the battlefield that will directly translate into a relative position of each side when they finally do meet for peace talks. Skibitsky is correct in his assessment, and it can be expected that Russia will continue to grow stronger through 2024 and 2025 to improve their position in future talks, and Ukraine will be desperate for Western aid to give them the firepower and the situational awareness to apply the assets given to them in the most impactful way. The West seems to have convinced Ukraine to stay on the strategic defensive through 2024, so this will give the Russians the strategic initiative, but will allow the Ukrainians to better preserve their comparatively limited manpower and exact a higher cost on the Russian manpower. This is how the Ukraine hopes to improve its position in future talks. It is unfortunate that more lives will have to be sacrificed to wait until 2025, but this is due to both sides not seeking compelling reasons to come to peace table and the lack of international effort to end the war. The Swiss Peace Conference will be a futile effort that would be better used to find a real way forward out of the war. 2024 will be a telling year, not only on the battlefield, but how the politics on both sides react as the French have deployed troops to Ukraine. And though apparently not in a combat role, French President Macron said that he would deploy more troops if the Russians broke through the Ukrainian defenses and if Zelensky requests French assistance. Will this aggressive French position help moderate the war and help it wind down in 2024, or is it just upping the ante? With the expected start of the Russian spring offensive, it may not take that long to get the answer.